Welcome to Stories Junction. Let's begin today's story. Hey, I'm Marcus. I want to share a story that starts with me planning a life with a woman I thought was my forever and ends with me quietly dialing my lawyer after she walked out over what seemed like a trivial fight. Just 2 days later, she was the one blowing up my phone, begging to talk. But to understand why I took the steps I did, why I went from love to legal action, you need to go back to the beginning, to when I first met Lauren. Without that, none of this will make sense. It all started 3 years ago when I visited my family in Oregon. I'd flown into Portland for a routine catch-up. Nothing special, just a chance to see my parents and siblings. The day before I met Lauren, I was grabbing coffee with my dad in his cozy kitchen, the kind with mismatched mugs and a view of the pines. He leaned back, sipped his coffee, and said, "Marcus, you're 34. When are you going to find someone to settle down with?" We chuckled, but his words stuck with me, like a pebble in my shoe. I brushed it off, but it made me wonder if I was missing something. A couple of days later, a buddy of mine invited me to a low-key gathering at a local brewery. That's where I met Lauren. We ended up in the same circle, debating everything from craft beer to city politics. She had this way of speaking, sharp, confident, but not pushy, that pulled me in. We didn't see eye to eye on everything, but her perspective kept me hooked. By the end of the night, I knew I wanted to see her again. I asked for her number, and she gave it with a smile that felt like a promise. That night, I texted her just a casual follow-up. To my surprise, she replied within minutes, and our conversation took off like we'd known each other for years. Lauren was a wedding planner based in Portland. She loved her work, and you could hear in her voice the way she described turning chaos into someone's perfect day. I told her I was just visiting, that my life was in Denver, where I worked as a project manager. The distance didn't seem to bother her. We kept texting, then calling, and by the time I boarded my flight back to Denver, it felt wrong not having her nearby. But we didn't let that stop us. Our chats became a daily ritual. Morning texts, late-night calls, sharing random bits of our lives. A few weeks later, I booked another trip to Oregon. Sure, I wanted to see my family, but Lauren was the real reason. That trip turned into two more, each one spent exploring Portland with her. Food trucks, riverside walks, quiet coffee shops. We laughed, we talked, we connected. Before we ever put a label on it, I knew I was falling for her. So did she. We decided to try a long-distance relationship. At first, the distance felt manageable. My job was mostly remote, though my company required one in-office day a week, which kept me tethered to Denver. I already visited Oregon regularly for family, so flying out to see Lauren wasn't a stretch. We texted constantly, called every night, and I made the trip whenever I could. She visited Denver a couple of times, but I did most of the traveling. I didn't mind. To me, it was an investment in something real, something worth building. But as months turned into a year, the distance started to weigh on me. Love is great, but when you're picturing a future with someone, 800 miles feels like a chasm. I started wondering how long we could keep this up. Was this serious enough for one of us to uproot our life? Right as I was wrestling with that, Lauren brought it up. We'd been dating for about 14 months when, during one of my visits, she looked at me over dinner and said, "If we're for real, one of us has to move." It was a gut check moment, the kind that tells you your relationship is about to change. In my head, it made sense for me to be the one to go. Lauren's business was rooted in Portland. Her clients, her network, her reputation. My job had some flexibility, even if going fully remote meant giving up a chunk of my annual bonus for not meeting the in-office requirement. That bonus wasn't small, but I figured love was worth more. Denver was home, though. I had friends I'd known for years, colleagues I respected, a life I'd built. Still, I packed it up and moved to Portland. Lauren was over the moon. Seeing her light up made me feel like I'd made the right call. I rented a place in the city, settled in, and for a while, everything felt perfect. I had no clue what was coming. Back then, I thought I was building a future with the woman I loved. But sometimes, the choices you make with the best intentions lead you to a place you never expected. So, I just moved to Portland for Lauren, leaving behind my life in Denver, friends, colleagues, a steady routine. At the time, it felt like the right move. Lauren's joy was infectious, and for a while, I was convinced I'd chosen love over convenience. But as the months rolled on, I started to see things I hadn't noticed before. Let me take you through what happened next, because this is where the cracks started showing. 6 months after I settled in Portland, I decided to propose. By then, I was all in. I'd given up a lot, my bonus, my social circle, my sense of home, and I had no regrets. To me, that was a sign Lauren was the one. I didn't want some generic ring. I wanted it to mean something. I found a local jeweler through a colleague's recommendation and spent weeks poring over designs. I chose a sapphire set in white gold. Simple, but striking, like Lauren. The ring cost me $14,000, not counting the hours I spent making sure it was perfect. I proposed on a chilly evening after a quiet dinner at her favorite bistro. I told her how she'd changed my life, how moving to Portland felt like gaining more than I'd lost, how I saw us building a future together. Her eyes welled up, and when she said yes, it was like the world clicked into place. We hugged, laughed, and for that moment, every sacrifice felt worth it. Once we were engaged, Lauren took charge of the wedding planning. She was adamant about it, saying with a grin, "Marcus, this is my turf. Let me work my magic." As a wedding planner, it made sense. I trusted her expertise and wanted her to have the day she'd always dreamed of. She dove in headfirst, calling up vendors within days. She booked a venue, a gorgeous vineyard just outside Portland, hired a caterer, a florist, even a string quartet, all people she knew from her network. It was like watching a conductor lead an orchestra she'd rehearsed with for years. I didn't mind her taking the lead, but one thing nagged at me: the lack of formal contracts. Most deals were sealed with handshakes, texts, or quick emails. No clear terms, no cancellation policies, just trust between friends. It felt off to me, coming from a world of project management where every detail is documented. But I didn't push. This was her domain, and I figured she knew best. That was my first mistake. Then came the costs. Every vendor needed a deposit, and I paid them all. Lauren never offered to split the expenses, and I didn't question it. I assumed it was my role, especially since I'd moved into her world. By the time we were deep into planning, I'd spent close to $35,000, caterers, venue, flowers, you name it. My savings were taking a hit, but I saw it as an investment in us. My sister, though, wasn't so sure. During a visit, she pulled me aside and said, "Marcus, shouldn't you two be making these calls together? It's your wedding too." I brushed it off, saying Lauren was just passionate that this was her thing. But her words lingered. Things got more complicated when Lauren moved in with me. I thought it was the natural next step. Engaged couples live together, right? But there's a difference between dating someone and sharing a home. Little habits started to surface. Lauren could be particular, almost controlling about how things were done. Dishes, laundry, even where I left my shoes. She'd get snappy under stress, and with the wedding looming, stress was constant. I tried to be patient, but the tension was building. The first real fight came over the guest list. My family means everything to me. We're tight, even though we're scattered across the country. My cousins, my aunts, even my 80-year-old grandma, they were all planning to fly to Portland for the wedding. Some had never been on a plane before, but they were coming for me. So when I saw the guest list Lauren drafted, and none of their names were on it, I was stunned. I asked her about it, thinking it was an oversight. She shrugged and said, "I want a small wedding, Marcus. It's what I've always pictured." Her words hit like a punch. Her wedding? I explained how much it meant to have my family there, how they were making sacrifices to show up. But instead of listening, she doubled down. "You never back my vision," she snapped. I was floored. I'd moved states, paid for everything, and now I wasn't supportive? For the first time, I didn't let slide. I told her this wasn't just her day. It was ours. My family was non-negotiable. She stormed off, and I stood my ground. That fight changed something. We patched it up, sort of, but the air between us wasn't the same. Lauren added my family to the list, but it felt like a concession, not a compromise. I started noticing other things. How she'd make decisions without consulting me. How she'd dismiss my input if it didn't fit her vision. The wedding planning, which should have brought us closer, was driving a wedge instead. As the date approached, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't a team. I'd given up so much, but it felt like Lauren was calling all the shots. Little did I know, one conversation, over something as simple as money, would push us to a breaking point we couldn't come back from. The wedding was getting closer, and with every passing day, the tension between Lauren and me grew thicker. I'd moved to Portland, shelled out tens of thousands of dollars, and bent over backward to make this work, but it felt like I was losing my voice in our relationship. The guest list fight had left a scar, and though we'd moved past it on the surface, something was off. This part of the story is where things start to unravel, where one moment flipped everything upside down. Living together had already exposed the rough edges of our relationship. Lauren's need for control spilled into every corner of our shared life. She'd rearrange my desk without asking, snap at me for leaving dishes in the sink, or shut down if I suggested a different way to handle something. I try to chalk it up to wedding stress. Planning a big event is no joke, especially when it's your own. But the more I let things slide, the more I felt like I was tiptoeing around her instead of building a partnership. The wedding planning itself was a runaway train. Lauren was in her element, coordinating vendors and finalizing details, but I was starting to question the process. The lack of contracts still bothered me. I'd paid deposits for the venue, caterers, florists, everything, but there were no formal agreements, just texts and verbal promises between Lauren and her industry friends. I'd spent close to $40,000 by now, and I had little to show for it beyond receipts and Lauren's assurances that it's all under control. My gut told me to ask questions, but every time I brought it up, she'd brush me off with, "This is how it works in my world, Marcus." Trust me, my family started to notice the imbalance. During a call with my mom, she asked pointedly, "Why are you footing the entire bill? Shouldn't Lauren be pitching in?" I didn't have a good answer. I just assumed it was my responsibility, especially since I'd moved into her city, her life. But the more I thought about it, the more it stung that Lauren never offered to share the costs or even the decisions. I told my mom I didn't want to rock the boat, but her question planted a seed of doubt. Then came the night that broke us. It was a week before the final venue walkthrough, and we were sitting at the kitchen table going over last-minute logistics. I transferred a lot of money to Lauren over the months, deposits, vendor payments, you name it. But when I tried to piece together where it all went, the numbers didn't add up. Some vendors had been paid in full, others only partially, and there were gaps I couldn't explain. I wasn't accusing her of anything. I just wanted clarity. So I asked, "Lauren, can you walk me through the payments? I'm trying to get a handle on what's left." Her reaction was like flipping a switch. Her face hardened, and she went dead silent for a moment. Then she slammed her hand on the table and shouted, "The wedding's off. I'm not marrying someone who doesn't trust me." Before I could process what she'd said, she grabbed her keys, stormed out of the apartment, and slammed the door behind her. I sat there, stunned, replaying the moment in my head. It was just a question. How do we go from that to her calling off the wedding? At first, I thought she was just heated. We'd had fights before. She'd get mad, need space, and come back to talk. So I waited. I texted her once, asking if she was okay. No reply. I called, left a voicemail, and got nothing. The apartment felt eerily quiet that night, and I barely slept, hoping she'd walk through the door and we'd sort out. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just a tantrum. The next day, around noon, she came back. I was in the living room, still hoping we could talk like adults. But the second she walked in, I knew something was wrong. She moved like a stranger, heading straight for the bedroom without a word. Her face was blank, her eyes avoiding mine. I followed her and saw her pulling clothes from the closet, stuffing them into a duffel bag. That's when I noticed her left hand. The engagement ring, the one I'd spent weeks designing, the one that cost me $14,000, was gone. "Lauren," I said, keeping my voice steady, "why aren't you wearing the ring?" She didn't stop packing. She zipped her bag, looked at me coldly, and said, "We're done, Marcus, and I'm keeping the ring." My stomach dropped. This wasn't a fight anymore. This was a declaration. I tried to stay calm, asking her to sit down, to explain what was going on. But she just slung the bag over her shoulder and walked out, leaving me standing there, the door clicking shut behind her. That moment was a turning point. The woman I'd moved states for, the one I'd planned a future with, had just walked away without a backward glance. And she thought she could keep the ring? No. That's when I knew I couldn't just let this go. I picked up my phone and called a lawyer friend back in Denver. I laid out everything: the move, the money, the ring, the fight. He listened, then said, "Marcus, you've got options here. Let me connect you with someone in Portland who knows Oregon law." That same day, I spoke to the new lawyer, a guy named Tom who specialized in family law. I told him the whole story from the moment I met Lauren to her walking out with my ring. Tom was calm, but direct. He explained that Oregon law gave me a shot at fighting back. He outlined 3 angles we could pursue. First, the engagement ring. In Oregon, an engagement ring is a conditional gift. If the marriage doesn't happen, it legally belongs to the giver. Second, something called breach of promise to marry. It's rare, but it could cover the financial and emotional toll of me uprooting my life for a wedding that was now canceled. Third, unjust enrichment. Lauren had benefited from the $40,000 I'd spent on a wedding coordinated through her buddies, with no real contracts to show for it. Hearing this lit a fire in me. I wasn't powerless. I told Tom to start the process. I didn't know where this would lead, but I wasn't about to let Lauren walk away with everything I'd given her: my money, my trust, my future. After Lauren walked out, declaring our engagement over and claiming she'd keep the $14,000 ring, I was done playing nice. Her exit left me reeling, but it also woke me up. I'd given up my life in Denver, poured $40,000 into a wedding that was now canceled, and trusted her with every step. Now, I was on the phone with a lawyer named Tom, ready to fight back. This part of the story is where the battle begins, and where Lauren realizes I'm not backing down. Tom, my Portland-based lawyer, was methodical. After I gave him the full rundown: moving to Oregon, funding the wedding, Lauren's sudden departure, he laid out her plan. We'd file a lawsuit with 3 main claims: the return of the engagement ring as a conditional gift under Oregon law, damages for breach of promise to marry, and unjust enrichment for the wedding expenses Lauren had controlled. The ring was valued at $14,000. The wedding costs were around $40,000. On top of that, we'd argue for relocation damages, since I'd left my social network and sacrificed part of my income to move for her. The total we were seeking? Just over $60,000, plus the ring. The next morning, we filed the suit. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. I wasn't just suing my ex-fiancée. I was suing the woman I'd loved, the one I planned to marry. But her actions left me no choice. I trusted her, and she'd taken advantage of that trust. The lawsuit wasn't just about money. It was about accountability. Lauren's reaction was immediate. The day she was served, my phone lit up. First came a text: "Marcus, can we talk? Please." I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the reply button, but I didn't respond. Minutes later, she called. Then again, and again. 6 calls in a row, each one going to voicemail. I listened to the first message. She sounded shaken, her voice trembling as she said, "This is crazy, Marcus. We don't need to do this. Let's just talk." The next few messages shifted tone. She was crying in one, begging me to drop the suit. Another accused me of overreacting, saying it was all a misunderstanding. By the last voicemail, she was angry, calling me petty and vindictive. I didn't call her back. Instead, I forwarded the messages to Tom. He advised me to keep communication minimal and let him handle things. But Lauren didn't stop. She sent a long email claiming she'd been stressed, that she hadn't meant to end things, that we could work it out privately. She even offered to return the ring if I dropped the lawsuit. I ran it by Tom, who shook his head. "She's trying to lowball you," he said. "The ring's just the start. You're owed more than that." I told Lauren through a single text. If she wanted to settle, she needed to cover the full $60,000 plus the ring. Her reply: "You're ruining my life." I didn't respond. In squat my head, I thought, you ruined mine first. The legal process was grueling. It dragged on for months, a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and meetings. Lauren's lawyer tried to paint me as the bad guy, arguing I'd pressured her into a wedding she wasn't ready for. But the facts were on my side. I had bank statements showing every payment I'd made, deposits to vendors, transfers to Lauren's account, even the jeweler's receipt for the ring. Tom hammered home the lack of contracts, pointing out how Lauren had funneled my money through her network with no accountability. The breach of promise claim was trickier, but we leaned on my relocation from Denver, showing how I'd alter my career and life based on her promise to marry. Mediation was a disaster. Lauren showed up looking defiant, her lawyer tossing out lowball settlement offers. She claimed the wedding expenses were shared decisions and that I'd agreed to her keeping the ring. I didn't budge. Neither did she. The mediator threw up his hands, and we headed for court. As the trial date loomed, I started to see the toll it was taking on Lauren. Friends who knew her told me she was losing clients. Portland's wedding industry is tight-knit, and word spreads fast. Whispers about our lawsuit were hurting her reputation. Brides want planners they can trust, not someone tangled in legal drama with their own fiancé. I didn't feel sorry for her, not after everything, but I was surprised at how quickly things were unraveling for her. The court date arrived, and Tom was ready. He presented our case like a story. A man who'd given up everything for love, only to be left with nothing when his fiancée walked away. The judge listened closely as we laid out the evidence, the payments, the ring, my move to Portland. Lauren's lawyer tried to spin it, but their arguments fell flat. The lack of contracts worked against her. It showed she'd mishandled the funds I'd entrusted to her. When the ruling came, it was a win for me. The judge ordered Lauren to return the $14,000 ring. I was awarded $25,000 for the wedding expenses, partial reimbursement, but more than I'd expected. The breach of promise claim landed too, with $10,000 in damages for the financial and emotional impact of my relocation. It wasn't the full $60,000, but it was validation. Lauren's face in the courtroom was stone cold, her eyes fixed on the floor. I thought that would be the end of it. I'd won, right? But the story doesn't stop there. What happened next showed me that consequences don't always end with a judge's gavel. The courtroom victory felt like a weight lifted. The judge had ruled in my favor. Lauren was ordered to return the $14,000 engagement ring, pay $25,000 for the wedding expenses I'd covered, and another $10,000 for the breach of promise to marry, acknowledging the life I'd uprooted moving from Denver to Portland. I walked out of that courthouse thinking I'd gotten justice. But this story doesn't end with a gavel. The real consequences, for Lauren, for me, for the life we'd planned, played out in ways I didn't expect. Here's how it all wrapped up. After the ruling, I expected some closure. The ring was returned within a week. Lauren had no choice, as the court order was clear. Getting it back was bittersweet. It was a beautiful piece, but it carried too many memories. I sold it to a jeweler for $10,000, less than I'd paid, but I didn't want it sitting in a drawer. The money helped, but the $35,000 in damages was another story. Lauren was supposed to pay in installments, but from the start, she was inconsistent. She'd send a partial payment one month, skip the next, and make excuses about cash flow. My lawyer, Tom, warned me this might happen. Court orders are only as good as the person's ability or willingness to pay, he said. Meanwhile, Lauren's life started to crumble, and it wasn't just about the money. Portland's wedding industry runs on trust and reputation, and our lawsuit was no secret. Court judgments are public record, and in a city where word travels fast, Lauren's business took a hit. Brides and vendors started distancing themselves. I heard through mutual contacts that she'd lost major clients, and her online reviews took a nosedive. One scathing post from a bride mentioned unprofessional conduct and legal troubles, and it spread like wildfire. Lauren's social media, once full of glowing wedding photos, went quiet. I didn't set out to ruin her. My goal was accountability, not destruction. But I'd be lying if I said I felt bad for her. She'd walked out, kept the ring, and dismissed everything I'd sacrificed. Still, watching her business falter made me realize how high the stakes had been for both of us. This wasn't just a breakup. It was a public reckoning. When Lauren defaulted on the court-ordered payments for 3 months straight, Tom didn't hesitate. He filed a lien against her business assets. That meant if she ever sold her company or tried to profit from it, I'd have a legal claim to a portion of the proceeds. The lien was like a shadow over her future, a constant reminder of the debt she owed. The pressure piled up, lost clients, bad press, mounting legal fees. By the end of the year, I got word through a friend that Lauren had filed for bankruptcy. Her business, once her pride and joy, was barely limping along. Did I get all my money back? No, Between the ring sale and the payments Lauren managed to make, I recouped about $30,000 of the $49,000 I was awarded. The rest, including the emotional toll, I'll never recover. But this wasn't just about the dollars. It was about standing up for myself, about not letting someone walk away with everything I'd given. Lauren faced real consequences, and for me, that was enough. Looking back, I've thought a lot about where things went wrong. Maybe I should have questioned the wedding expenses sooner or pushed back when Lauren took control. Maybe I ignored red flags because I was so caught up in the idea of us. Moving to Portland, proposing, paying for everything, it all felt right at the time. But love can blind you to the fine print. Living with Lauren showed me who she really was under pressure, and that final fight over money revealed a truth we couldn't unsee. I'm back in Denver now, rebuilding my life. I reconnected with old friends, found a new job with better pay, and started to feel like myself again. The experience left me cautious, but not bitter. I still believe in love, but I'm smarter about it now. Trust is earned, and partnership means both people show up. So that's my story. It's not a fairy tale, but it's mine. I'm curious, what do you think? If you were in my shoes, would you have gone a legal route, or would you have walked away? Would you have seen the signs earlier, or was I just too deep in it? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for sticking with me through this. It's been a wild ride, and sharing it feels like closing a chapter